There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, what a pleasure, what a treat to welcome Bernie of Bertie Lombardi on Instagram fame back for another book discussion. Hello, Bernie.
Hi, Shawn. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for taking time out of your busy prize list reading life to talk about a book that, as far as I'm aware, isn't on any prize lists, at least not this year. We're here to discuss a Spanish novel in translation, Oldladyvoice by Elisa Victoria, translated from the Spanish by Shawn Whittle, published by And Other Stories last year, and originally published in Spanish in 2019. And this is a very deeply character-centered novel about a 9-year-old Spanish girl. I believe she lives in Seville, and her mother has some unnamed illness. It seemed like it might be cancer, but anyway, she had some serious illness and was often hospitalized or otherwise unavailable. But when she was healthy enough, she was a very strong, very larger than life personality. But the little girl, do we know her name, by the way? Marina. There's 3 generations of Marinas, right? Marina the grandmother, Marina the mother, and the daughter, the 9-year-old is Marina. And she spends a lot of time staying either on weekends or in the biggest chunk of this novel for the entire summer with her grandma. And she has a very close relationship with her. And I think that's, in terms of an opening premise, that's what I would say, other than that 9-year-old Marina's character is very layered and interesting. First person narrative. So, Bernie, did you like this book?
I did. I liked it. I didn't it's not like my favorite book of all time, but I liked it enough. I really appreciated how this author got into the psyche of her child character. I found that very interesting, very very relatable, and also like subversive to how we typically think of children. It actually kind of reminded me of The Discomfort of Evening, which won the International Booker a couple of years ago. That's also about like a younger like preteen kind of aged protagonist, though that novel was a lot darker. The novel's not really similar, but they're kind of similar in the sense that like they're kind of pervy and like there's a lot of poop talk, and they're very horny, both of the characters. And again, like we don't get that a lot in literature, like when we get child characters. And so that's something that I appreciated. I do think there were times where I think her thoughts and the vocabulary she used, but that could have been like a translation issue, were a little advanced for a 9-year-old.
I thought so too, definitely, yeah.
But yeah, like, I mean, that didn't bother me too much, but I did notice it. I guess my initial impression is that I really liked the character. I did feel at times, because I was in the middle of reading this when the International Booker long list was announced, that I was starting to feel like a little like I wanted to get done with it because I wanted to like focus on that. And that can like impact my experience with books sometimes, when I'm like, I'm enjoying it and I like it, but I also like want it to be over, not because of the book, just because of like something else that's like, in reach. So that might have played a little bit into like why it wasn't a book that I ended up like being obsessed with. But yeah, I liked it overall.
Okay, well, we're basically in the same place, but just given my character, I'm going to sound a little more negative and bitchy than you. But basically, yeah, I'm glad I read it. I enjoyed it. I liked being inside her head, and it was a book that I could have put down at any point and not worried about finishing. Like there was nothing really that was repulsive at all for me. But when I would pick it back up, and it wasn't like I was dreading picking it back up, but at any point I could have thought, oh, that's enough. I don't need it really to know anymore. I think I've got this character. I understand her. I appreciate her, but I don't know that I need to know any more about her life. So maybe this is a good place for me to say, I should have said it at the beginning, that Bernie and I absolutely feel that there are no spoilers in this book because there's so little plot. We're not going to talk about anything that happens in the last quarter of the book, but nothing really happens in the last quarter of the book. So, but there's not going to be a spoiler wall where we save things, and it really is such a character-driven novel that it would be impossible for us to spoil it. I enjoyed the light and dark, the way they kind of worked together, because she was really horny, if that's the right word to use for a 9-year-old. But she certainly was very curious about sex and certainly talked in a very precocious and rude way, I guess, from the perspective of a parent, to herself, to us, the reader, about all her sexual fantasies and whatever. And I loved all that. And I never was quite sure, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this at some point in the discussion, about she was also so basically good. She was such a good person. She was such a solidly good person. And she had all these, she was obsessed or curious with so many dark things, but it never really shaped her as a person, as a 9-year-old girl. And I wondered if, and I may need some more distance, I just finished the book a few hours ago, whether, like, all the characters were really upright characters. They had superficial flaws, but they were basically so good. That was a little bit strange for me. So did that all fit together or didn't it? I'm still thinking about that. But yeah, I really enjoyed spending time with her. Lots of readers don't like child narrators, and my experience of that is changing because I've been discovering some really where it's really well done, and that I don't get annoyed or wish that I wasn't in the head of this annoying little kid. That didn't come up at all here. It's just that I didn't maybe need so much. Like you said, I was ready for it to be over about halfway through.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that I agree with everything you said. I also felt the same way, where I didn't necessarily need to pick it back up again, but I did because we were reading it together. But when I did pick it up, I didn't mind being with her. And yeah, I didn't think about that about the characters, but they are all like really, really good, except for the kids that bully her a bit. But even like she's very forgiving of them.
Yes.
Like we're not meant to like really hate anybody. Like the mom is good, the grandma's good, even the mom's boyfriend's really good. So yeah.
I don't quite know how I feel about it, but it was very, very obvious to me. Like there was nobody that I was worried about her spending time with. Like the stepdad, he couldn't have been a, more wholesome character. She stole porno magazines off his nightstand when he was sleeping, but he was not a dangerous character at all. He was very benign, and there was conflict in the family, but it didn't ever, between the grandmother and the mother, that we didn't really ever see. It was just kind of referred to. I mean, there might have been a little bit, but yeah, I have to think about that some more. But certainly enjoyed 9-year-old Marina's dirty mind.
Did you ever get confused about what her age was? Like, I felt like there were times that it flashed back and it would mention like her being like 4 or 5, and then I would get like confused as to where it was changing, like when she was 9, when it was a younger age, and then like she would be like 4, and then it would be talking about something sexual, and I'd be like, wait, she's thinking about this she knows this when she's 4, but then like she'd be 9 again, and I don't know.
I did, and I assumed it was just because I was, only reading with one eye open or something. But yes, I did occasionally feel confused about that. Yeah. About the level of her vocabulary and diction, and it wasn't even just vocabulary; it was kind of the way she conceptualized the world that seemed quite precocious for a 9-year-old. But I think probably there are 9-year-olds that might be like that, so I could kind of suspend any disbelief I had, but I certainly did think, oh, she's 9. Yeah.
It was like very philosophical almost at points.
Yes, there was a precocious wisdom to her observations of human nature, of children and adults, and millennial philosophies, coming to the end. This was set in basically 1992.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed all the references to Spanish culture and politics and stuff. I Googled the heck out of it as I was reading it. Didn't know any of those things about Spain, so that was interesting.
Yeah, I love
what are
the references to like sausage and mortadell sandwiches. That was
and what was the Spanish sweet snack? Churros?
yes.
The grandma was always getting up after she'd get out of bed at 11 o'clock at night and walk down the street to buy some. Have you ever had churros?
So churros is also a Mexican thing, and I don't know if they're the same as churros in Spain, but I've had Mexican churros. It's like a fried pastry, like in cinnamon and sugar.
I've had them in Japan at
Oh, okay.
donut shops, so now I know what they are. But that part was quite vivid, and the references to the Spanish graphic artists that created kind of dirty manga. Not they wouldn't use that word. Maybe they would. I don't know. But comic books that she loved to read that had nudity and perverted sex scenes in them, and the stuff about didn't she bring one of those to school one day and show it?
Yep.
That rang so true. That part is like, oh my god, I remember doing
Chat
that,
like
or
under the
somebody
desk.
else doing that. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that took me back to my perverted childhood. Would you like to share a perverted childhood memory with us, Bernie?
Oh god, I don't remember.
I'm teasing. You don't have to.
I do remember getting in trouble for lifting a girl's skirt up.
Well, it's kind of obvious how that all turned out, but anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when I was grade 2, I was chasing all the girls wanting to kiss them. Yeah. Some things do change quite dramatically.
I really appreciated the ways that she connected with her mom when her mom wasn't there. So like with like the smell and like buying the perfume and also I like it was funny like her grandma like would make like the tasty fried food, but like she would like kind of like crave the bland cooking of her mom just because like it was her mom. I don't know.
Yes. So many of the relationships were demonstrated and kind of illustrated through food in this novel. Yeah. Marina, the 9-year-old, was such an affectionate character.
Yes.
And just believed kind of in the basic goodness of the people around her, and according to the way the story's told, that she was justified in that. But yeah, there's a powerful scene at the end that we won't talk about because it might be considered a spoiler. A conversation between her and her mother that I thought was really quite moving. This was probably the one place in the novel that got me in the gut. Oh, maybe we should talk a little bit about. So the mother is ill, and she's kind of out of the book for big parts of the novel, but she's such a big character. One of the things about 9-year-old Marina is that she's being kept in the dark about what exactly is going on with her mom's health. She knows that she's sick, but they're not giving her any information, and she is in that way. She is a 9-year-old. Like that's okay for her, and she's got other things to think about or whatever, but she's worried. But I thought the way that was handled, that struck me as true to life. And like I say, we're not going to talk about how that ends. You can read the book to find out what happens at the end. But her mother's illness is a big part of what little plot there is. Kind of revolves around the fact that her mother's got significant health struggles, and also dresses. It opens with a scene of her. I think she's 4 in that opening few pages, being obsessed with her mother's, what do you call it, flamenco dress. And she is dressed at various times mostly either by her mother or her grandmother. The clothes she has are considered really nerdy by her peers. So she's teased. And yes. I couldn't get a feel for whether those clothes were nerdy, but she certainly was teased by the other little kids around her. And also the title, Oldladyvoice. Apparently she had a really deep voice, like an adult, like an old woman. So one of her classmates called her Oldladyvoice, and that's why. Yeah. So that ties into the precociousness and where we both questioned, is this really how a 9-year-old would talk or think? But
I could say something about that just came to mind about like it being about a child, and kind of like how we talked about how she's so very like she's like optimistic about the world. In my film class, I teach a couple movies that are like coming of age movies, and we talk about oftentimes how the child characters kind of represent this innocence, or this like idea that you come into the world innocent and then you're socialized and into becoming kind of like less optimistic, and socialized by the realities that like impact people and shape who you become. And I wonder if this was a book that would have then continued into her teenage years, if we would have seen like an evolution, or we would have seen changes to how her character is. And I guess one thing that almost could exist as a counterpoint to Marina's character is that one female character who's a couple years older, who's like kind of like
Quite
is both
naughty
mean and nice to her.
Yes.
And like maybe that is like kind of like what Marina can, or like I guess she represents like who Marina could become or who she won't become, or I don't know. It's just like an interesting like counterpoint.
Isn't she the one where and I don't think this is a spoiler, but isn't she the one that Marina has a chance to actually get it on with? But
yes,
she comes out. Yeah,
I think
yeah.
so. I think so. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. So that this is very much prepubescent. She's 9. She's not adolescent. She's talking like a teenager, and she's kind of thinking like a teenager, but it's theory. And once you get into adolescence, I don't think I need to explain this, but and the hormones start raging. That's when things can also get possibly dark, or where you get yourself into scary situations, or hopefully you have really positive, really sexy, positive experiences. Yeah.
And like a lot of like most of this novel, like you said earlier, takes place in her mother's absence, even though she's like there. And I guess I just wonder what actually, I don't want to spoilers. the one thing we said we wouldn't say.
Yeah.
Her mom, who has this strong personality, right?
And probably of the 3 women, she's the most flawed. Like she has she's scrappy. She likes to get into, I think, not only verbal fights, but physical fights with people. She just got that kind of personality. She's likes to get it going, but she's still in her own way a really good mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about gender? These are 3 women. There's a benign stepdad that is kind of a bit player in the drama. And I read some reviews that said, and I hadn't noticed this myself, tell me if you did, that the family does not use the male patronymic in their name. So they do you know how that works? I don't really know how Spanish Mexican names, but don't they have 2 surnames? One is the first surname of each parent. So the first surname is the father's surname. And of course, the father has 2 surnames, but it's the father's first surname is the first surname of the child, and the second is the mother. So, for example, Federico Garcia Lorca, that means his father was Garcia, surname, and mother was Lorca.
Got it.
And from reviews I've read, but I didn't notice it myself when I was reading the book, this family does not use that first surname. They only use the mother's surname when they're named.
Interesting.
So it's kind of a matrilineal family. Any other things you noticed about gender? Certainly she was in some ways not your typical, she was kind of tomboyish.
I think that says something about gender, because I do think, like we've said, like she's very horny and a little perverted, but we usually associate that with maleness. And I think that like maybe she's intentionally making that something that's female, right? Yes. Or at least, acknowledging the feminine, like it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that it's not exclusively a male prerogative. Yeah. And she lives in a world of women. She got a pretty benign stepfather. And then in terms of sexuality, she seems to be maybe would you say equally interested in playing with girls and boys?
Yes, has a very fluid relationship to that. One step back, I know a couple I have a couple friends who are part of families that are very female, like they're just women dominated families, not a lot of men, but the men who are very similar to this guy. Like I think that
the stepfather.
Yes, I think
Uh-huh.
that holds true based on my experience with those kinds of families.
And then another part of her character that she talks a lot about or thinks a lot about is that her real father is absent and she's never really been able to establish much of a relationship. He has tried, maybe it didn't work. There's some scenes about that, but that it's a big kind of hole in her life.
Mhm.
And that's part of her psychological makeup. So did you find it funny?
I
I'm not
found
sure
it
that I
cute.
found
I found it
it cute.
charming.
Made me smile a few times, never laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't
That
say
didn't
it's
strike me as
funny,
being
but
too.
it's charming.
Yeah. And probably if it was just a short story or a novella, I would have liked it better, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I think
But
so. I think the
glad I
cover is
read it.
beautiful.
The cover is beautiful, and in the introduction, the translator says that this is actually the author's mother's dress, or the dress that the mother gave her, the author, as a child. And it's
Hmm.
actually, I think, a scan or a photo of the pattern of that dress.
Do we know how old the author is? Like what generation
Um,
the author is from?
she's young. This is her debut. Does she not have a Wikipedia page? That means she's really young. The pictures I've seen, she's quite young. Like she looks like she might be 30.
Mhm.
Yeah, born in Seville in 1985. So however old that is.
That's 3 years older than me.
Okay.
So 38.
Oh, so she's older than her pictures look.
Yeah.
Just like you are older than you look.
So she's a millennial.
Oh, she has books of short stories out. One of her collections of short stories, and I don't know if it's translated or not, but it's certainly an English title. Porn and Pains.
Hmm,
Not pain, porn and pains.
interesting.
Yeah, we have to check that out. Maybe I like her short stories better than
I
her
think
novel.
I think I still would recommend it.
Oh,
But
I would recommend it too.
yeah, I just wouldn't recommend it if you want something that like is gonna like move you like that like you're gonna move quickly through. Or I think it's good if you just want to sit in something. I think that's what it's good for.
And yeah, it's the kind of book that you could put down for a month, pick it back up, and just enjoy it that way. Read it over 6 months or read it over a month. I read it over about 3 weeks, I think. Yeah, I would recommend it. It's very character centered. It's really well written / translated. There was many things to admire about it. I'd have read it because it gave me a chance to talk books with you again.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing another one in a few months. I'm looking forward to that one. That one's going to probably leave this one in the dust perversion wise. I have a feeling.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bernie.
Yes, thank you.